Terminology, etymology, when it comes to the law. Lawyers finding physicists to make up really stupid definitions that you can't transliterate so that you have to go through a law firm. The fix was in before you were born. We're going to be doing, this is ostensibly about firearm regulations and how that pertains to things that have nothing to do with firearms because it bleeds over, and why they're making sure that you can't find out the real reasons for things. Let's start with some basics. Most laws are based on somebody doing something that caused themselves or other people harm, or have been found to be a nuisance, or something that causes stress in the population. Seems pretty simple. Noise limits and that sort of thing. Firearms and other things that do similar things or look the same, very importantly, are important things that get rules made about them. And it doesn't matter if you like them or not. The practicality of some of these is obvious, other times not so much. Safety limits for toys, you'll shoot your eye out, is literally the basis for it. In fact, in some cases, court cases, as well as laws, they literally use the expression, you'll shoot your eye out, kid, in quotes, referencing a TV show, or movie, excuse me. If under 14 years old, toy regulations for appropriateness, as of 2017, for kinetic energy in a projectile are rated. Now, the rating for this is in a format that does not translate at all for anything. The equations you find for it are for the energy transfer rate for HVAC and for boilers. It has nothing to do with this. But this is a lot like rating things in megatons of energy yield when you're talking about a lawnmower engine. You can technically use this measurement, but it's inappropriate. This is done on purpose to make it to where it's either extremely appropriate to a very narrow definition, which was never given, and it isn't, or it was done to obscure the subject so nobody could argue the case in court. I'm a pessimist. I'm assuming a lawyer decided to do this. Kinetic energy for kinetic, for projectile, in joules per meter squared or joules per square meter. Now, I understand why this is being done, but let me give you some examples and it'll become really clear. Your average Nerf dart used in a toy gun comes in various sizes. Now, this is a lot like there are paintball guns that emulate approximately really two calibers. In paintball guns, you have one that basically is emulating a shotgun bore diameter. It's a 68.5 caliber designation if rifled. They actually have the same kind of rules that you have for, firearms, obviously. The other one is anywhere below 50 caliber. There's a 45 caliber equivalent and a 50 caliber equivalent, and there's even pellet guns and airsoft that have various bore diameters. And they match up as few of them as possible, and then you just make the guns look like whatever they're supposed to look like, but this limits it to a certain number of calibers or diameters or whatever. And this makes it to where you can then do apples to apples comparison no matter what they're made out of. You can have glass marbles, steel marbles, rubber, ceramic, whatever, or plastic like they use normally. You can have BB guns that run plastic so they're less dangerous. Get the idea, right? BB guns normally fire steel. So we're going to be talking about our standard Nerf dart that's a 50 caliber, and it's about 1 gram. There's a lot of quibbling about numbers, but it's about a gram of mass. That works out to X number of grains and whatever. Now, we're going to use joules per meter squared in Australia. Now, their designation they give is 1,600 joules per square meter. What they're doing is taking the actual joule rating, but the surface area of half an inch, and it's a circle, and extrapolating that to a square meter by increasing the amount of joules much larger. The idea is if you change it to being one of the other common Nerf diameters, which is supposed to emulate a shotgun, which is, 70 caliber or whatever, it changes the ratio. So you base it on using it as if you covered the entire surface area with equal impact. But they also give it in feet per second for a 1 gram Nerf dart that's half-inch diameter and circular on the blunt tip. 63 feet per second. So it's a feet per second rule. Yeah, but it's based on a very narrow definition with that dart. Now, if you're not aware of why this is important, Shotguns firing a slug that's, let's say, 73 caliber with a large weight to it, firing the same amount of weight but using birdshot over a distance, the same distance, will have different effects because the birdshot is physically smaller diameter and the air resistance changes it. All of it. So what they're doing here is they're coming up with a math of designation, which, again, there's no good definition. I just gave you it. That's as good as it gets. But this takes into account drag from the air. The fact that a smaller diameter projectile compared to the same density for the other material will have less ability to have penetrative damage. Birdshot won't penetrate as deep as buckshot or a slug. So this does make sense. But it's not being clear about it. Anyway, the United States has a limit of 81 feet per second for that particular dart. The European Union has 102 feet per second for that particular dart because it's based on the total surface area over a 1 meter by 1 meter square. If you were to take this dart and extrapolate it out from half an inch circle to a square meter, it would come out to 5,000 joules over 1 meter squared. 5,000 joules is pretty fucking heavy. That means you're shooting someone with enough darts that you're covering their entire surface area of their body, basically. Because you do the square meter and the wasting and packing and math, and it's hard to explain. But hitting an entire person's upper trunk and legs and arms at the same time with nothing but nerf darts at 102 feet per second works out to about 5,000 joules over the whole surface area of their body. That's what it comes from. Look up the joule rating. You can translate feet per second with this 1 gram nerf dart down to joules, but the spread factor here is what it's doing. Now, I understand exactly why this is, and it makes sense because it does account for, if you look at ballistic gel tests with buckshot versus birdshot, it tells you what the equivalent would be. It makes it apples to apples when it obviously isn't. This is apples to gerbils. But the point is, it makes sense, except nobody, and I mean nobody, went to the effort of explaining this anywhere. I had to go dig it up I dug it up from mostly a website on chemical reactions. But let's get on with it. What about 50 caliber paintballs? Well, they're about a gram, but they're short and stumpy and they're much more dense. 300 feet per second works out to almost 40,000 joules over a meter squared. That's much more excessive. But that's acceptable because of the way it breaks on impact. It's not a solid object. It's a squishy thing that goes... It's 300 times faster. Well, 3 times faster. Carry the 2, divide by 0 there, sorry. But you get the idea. What about a Hasbro lawyer risk limit, upper limit, feet per second? 110 to 160 feet per second for anyone over 14 and over. Idiot kid shooting himself in the face with a nerf dart versus someone smart enough not to do that because they know they're going to hurt themselves. They're assuming they're not going to be dumb and they're going to shoot their friends in the butt. But yeah, that's the Hasbro / Dart Zone lawyer limit. Because, again, this looks like lawyers came up with this. Absolute laboratory environment limit for a nerf dart before it self-destructs, so there's no practical test for it. AKA the supersonic nerf dart. 1,200 feet per second before it actually shreds to the point that it's not useful, blows a hole through half-inch plywood. Considered absolutely lethal at that point by conventional wisdom by the U.S. Army. You get the idea. 1,000 feet per second for 1 gram dart, because that's a shit ton of foot-pound. Again, we're dealing with, good freaking God. But yeah, but they're not doing foot-pounds here. They're not doing joules. They're doing joules over a large surface area extrapolated up. Now, what is the lethality test that plywood board came up with? Plywood board, 36 foot-pounds, 1940s U.S. military standard for lethality, potential lethality, versus 60 foot-pounds, 2020 assessment by the U.S. Army, all around for ammunition, not nerf darts, obviously, for it to do the same thing. Again, they were both the pine board test or plywood test, depending on how you're looking at it, but they're talking about not potential lethality or over 50% death rate, but nearly a 100% death rate without being medically treated. Meaning, one of them's you'll eventually die versus the other one you're incapacitated, you're out of the game, you may not die. Their priorities were hitting them with 60 foot-pounds would definitely drop the person, stop them from being a threat. And if you're not aware of it, if you hit somebody in the gut that way, it won't kill them normally. They can get medical attention and they won't die. It's that they won't shoot anymore. Meanwhile, 36 feet per second, ideal shot, kills. So this is where these came from. And what about they found out what cartridge would do it, and they decided what can we shoot that would give a visual indication. Full penetration of a pine board or plywood board, 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch. They kept changing their answers. Let's talk about the lowest limit that has been seen in an actual death for either deliberate murder or accident. BB gun, 1,200 feet per second. Yeah, 25 foot-pounds, 34 joule, BB gun pellet pierced a human heart through the sternum. That's a definitive, highly likely lethal. If you miss the sternum, go between the ribs. Shot placement idea like the military where they only needed 36 foot-pounds? Yeah, this is 25 foot-pounds. Literally, it's almost identical. That's a 17.7 caliber, 4.5 millimeter, 8.8 grain, 1/2 gram object at 1,200 feet per second. Again, you're not aware of it, just like the supersonic Nerf dart. Obviously, it's the same number of foot-pounds, but it's a smaller surface area. It's dense. It's not going to deform, and it's going to penetrate into the chest. That was a fucking BB gun pellet. Well, actually, specifically a lead pellet that was a Diablo shape, aka aerodynamically stable, through a rifled barrel yet. And it was used by someone who intended to shoot the person, but may not have wanted to kill them, didn't know that it would kill them, didn't expect it, still went to prison for murder. Again, 25 to 36 foot-pounds is lethal, depending on shot placement. Eye injury happens at 1 joule, 0.74 foot-pounds, eye damage. 12 foot-pounds, 17 joules is declared not a toy in almost all municipalities. 12 foot-pounds or 17 joules because it can cause more than eye injury easily, 17 times, more intense than that, and definitively at or near the lower limit where you'd have to get between the ribs to take out a heart or just puncture a blood vessel in the neck. These are based on practicality limits and safety limits, and age limits for stupid people shooting themselves in the eye socket with a foam dart. Oh, it's soft and foamy. Not if it's going over 100 feet per second, it ain't. So, are these safety nanny rigs? I mean, we're just still talking about toys here. And air guns. And airsmiths who make Nerf guns that run on CO2 gas. An unregulated CO2 container, if it's heated by accident in sunlight, will put out, if you're not aware of it, 900 feet per second to 1,200 feet per second for a gun. Suddenly your air gun or even a Nerf gun, yeah, I'm not kidding, Nerf gun, could be potentially or highly likely lethal. Are these rules excessive? Would these qualify as a deadly weapon? Obviously. Would these qualify as something that would need to be regulated? That's up to every municipality. If you're not aware of where the origin stories for these are, now you are. Why are toy guns sometimes regulated that way? Because they maybe should be. This is up to debate for everybody. Check your limiters on your paintball guns to make sure you're not exceeding things, and be careful with those reballs. You can still go to prison because it's based on intent and effect, and you ought to have learned your lesson by following rules. By the way, if you're in an airsoft shooting match and someone shoots steel BB gun pellets, have them arrested every single time. Make them prove that they didn't mean to shoot you with something that could have gone through the skin and taken out your eye or taken your life. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Wish us all luck with all of